Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Namaskar, Suprabhat.
Namaskar, namaskar.
Yes, sir, we can hear you.
Yeah, okay.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning, good morning.
Yes, sir. Good morning.
Good morning. So I think
Good
we'll
morning,
wait
sir.
for a couple of minutes more because number of people I think are still quite less. Shall we wait?
Maybe we can start because recording is already available. So we can start, I suppose. Thank you.
How many are expected?
No expectation, sir. This is okay, I suppose.
This is okay.
Should be.
Okay, all right. As you wish, no problem. All right. So you are in the last term of your diploma program, right?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So this is the first session that we're going to have on this subject, development center management. So let me, okay. Mr.
Yeah,
Jagannath,
sir. The only thing is that I think very few of us have received the material, course material. So we are not having either the anything to read out. Thank you very much.
oh, I see. I'll anyway flag it to the head office. I'll tell them. Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. So I think let's chat. What are your expectations from this course and from me?
Great expectation, sir.
Sorry?
Great expectation.
No, I think you should specify. What are those great expectations? So, yeah, Padma Priya madam, please speak.
So for that now through this course we want to know how to arrive that total full-fledged program competencies. For example, what is the required and what is the current skill levels? How to identify the gaps? And how to fulfill the gaps? And for example, if there are some pointers are there for 1, 2, 3, 4 like that, they have a skill gap. So how to differentiate that between the gaps in between those 1, 2, 3, 4 criteria? Do we need to take different training programs for different skill level people for the same training? So these are all my expectations from the
Good.
basic level to the final till the completion of the training program.
Good. Thank you so much. Anyone who has got some prior experience in competency mapping, competency development in the people who are on the call? Has anyone got some?
Sir, we do aware, but we don't know what we are doing is appropriate, like that structured way. Because we do doing that competency matrix, but for me, I'm not sure whether I'll do that exact how we have to do it.
Okay. Which company are you working, ma'am?
I'm working in Johnson Lives, sir.
Okay. Anyone with banking experience in the call? Is there anyone with banking experience?
Yes, sir, myself.
Which bank, ma'am?
HSBC.
HSBC. Wonderful.
Yeah.
Do you anyway see the application of competency mapping in your organization?
Yes, sir. In fact, we do a very detailed exercise. So before drafting the JD, job descriptions, because I think basis that you are then able to look at what are the competencies required or skills required for a particular job.
Okay.
And then we try to hire basis those competencies. That's one part. The other part is when it comes to training and development, I think if a person is not skilled to that competency level, then we are able to look at what requirements are there and accordingly design a training roadmap and then probably have the trainings done accordingly.
Okay, that's great. That's great. So you have a very well-structured competency mapping, and the HR uses that very rigorously, you mean?
Yes.
Excellent. That's Very nice to hear that. Anybody else who want to share this perspective from your organization?
Sir, namaskar. I'm Jagannath Kulkarni. I work for a public sector,
Okay.
and public sector has got its own pluses and minuses. So, as far as this training, typically L&D, we don't call it L, we call it T, that is training. And
Yeah.
people are being sent for the training, though theoretically we do TNA, that is training needs analysis. We call for training needs from the employees, but practically speaking, that does not happen in its true sense. And many times we feel that this deployment, which I am always interested in deployment of, that means right people in the right place at the right time, that very less often we do find it. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah. Anyone else has anything else to contribute?
Yes, sir. So
Yes.
my name is Rasia. I work with Reliance Brands. And so currently we have an assessment center. However, it's not an assessment development center. So I'm interested to learn how do you structure the development part of the ADC, basically.
Okay. Wonderful. Very nice to hear that. Yeah. Okay. Anyone? Some more thoughts? I think let's make it more interactive than, just a pure monotonous lecture. All right. So since none of you are sharing anything more, so let me first tell you about, we haven't met probably before. This is the first interaction that we have. My name is Bhaskara. I work as a professor in the ICFI Business School in Hyderabad. I am based at Hyderabad. I am right now speaking to you from Hyderabad. I have done my diploma program way back in 2010, and I have been an active member of the Hyderabad chapter. I was the treasurer of the chapter for 2 years. Then I was the chairperson of the chapter for 2 years. I am now, of course, in the National Council till 2024, and then we'll have to see whether I will continue or not. So that is my basic profile and my association with ISTD. ISTD have been very active member for more than a decade. I think almost 14 years now, close to 1.5 decades. All right. So this is a new subject that has been introduced in the diploma program. Earlier, it was not there. But nevertheless, I think it's a very important, subject, and competency mapping is catching up. It should have been much better caught up by now in the Indian industry and Indian corporates. But for some various reasons, its takeoff has been pretty slow. So that is my basic take on this topic. But I think as we move forward, this is going to have prominence, and therefore all of you as prospective trainers and employees of various organizations who would like to implement the assessment center or development center in your own way, then this is going to be pretty useful. So let me first understand what you know about competence and competency. So can some of you share your thoughts on competence and competency?
Sir, in simple terms, to identify the ask, attitude, skill, and knowledge.
Okay. So attitude, skill, and knowledge constitutes what? Competence or competency, or both are the same, are both same?
Here I am little bit confused, sir.
Okay. No worries. No
Yeah.
worries. Yeah. Ma'am, Mayuri, ma'am.
So I think competence is an ability to do something successfully,
Okay.
is what I feel. And obviously, there are levels in which a person reaches that competency.
Mhm.
When you're able to do a particular task or have a particular skill to the level that it is expected, I think that would be termed as a competency, or that is when you achieve competency. Whereas competence is just the skill or the ability to be able to complete something efficiently or successfully, is what I feel.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Jagannath, sir.
Sir, I think competence is what is in you, and competency is what is ought to be in you. Means competency is the requirement, and competence is the what you are already having. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Interesting. Very, very interesting. Yeah. Anybody else? Padma Priya, ma'am.
Sir, competence is in our ability to do that. Competence. Competency is what we required for that particular job or activity.
Okay. Okay. Good. I think there's a different perspective from what others have shared. Yeah. Shivakumar, sir.
Sir, I'm Karpagam. So competency is a skill. Competence is an attribute.
Competency is a skill and competence is an attribute. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay. Very good. Very good. So I think as we can see from the responses that we've got from each one of you, there is certain amount of lack of clarity, and it right now it means different things for different people. Right, at least at the end of this chapter or this class, I hope that it will be clear to all of you, and all of us will have a same understanding of what is competence and what is competency. Yeah, Russia, competence is ability, skill. All right, okay. So let me start sharing my screen, and then we will continue. Can you see the screen now?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. So that is my email ID. And if you have any questions, you can make a note of it and share your questions or anything related to the course to that email ID. So though I mentioned here the development center book, which the ISTD head office is supposed to be circulating to all of you, but I am going to depend on several other resources. So it is not just from one material given by ISTD. It is going to be a combination of several other resources, including some other textbooks, some research papers and all. So please make a note of it. In the first module, the chapter 1, the contents are what is competency, type of competency, a competency moment, various models of competency development, relevance of competency for a learning and development professional. This is what is supposed to be included. But then I think when I started, preparing for your session, I've gone beyond this mandate and I am using much more. Okay. And I think we should be able to manage the timing. Time management, you don't worry about it, although I'm going a little beyond. So we'll still be able to do everything within the number of sessions prescribed. And those materials I am not sharing with all of you because there are several of them, and I don't want to confuse you by giving too much of stuff. Okay, now let's take this from Arthashastra. One of the points perspective that I always had is India, with its long history, never had any of the issues related to performance or the related issues related to people in its past. I have not come across anywhere the issues that are now coming up about, retention, retrenchment, discipline, suction, this and that, all kinds of issues that are happening, lack of competencies, lack of talent. These kinds of issues were never found, at least in the Indian history, to the best of my knowledge, because India had a very, very well-developed way of managing the people and the resources in the various forms of government and the organizations or the economic units. So one of the good quotes which one can see and understand how well developed we were in terms of human resources or the people management of people, you can see in Arthashastra. As can be read from here, the king shall thoroughly investigate all the qualities of anyone he is considering for appointment as a minister. right? I mean, even at the level of a minister, the king would go into the details. What would he, scrutinize? Of these qualities, nationality, family background, and amenability to discipline shall be verified from reliable people. Please understand, it is not one source. From here, it is clear that there were several people involved even in the recruitment of a minister. The candidate's knowledge of various arts shall be tested by experts in their respective fields. Intelligence, perseverance, and dexterity shall be evaluated by examining his past performance, while eloquence, boldness, and presence of mind shall be ascertained by interviewing him personally. Watching how he deals with others will show his energy, endurance, ability to suffer adversities, integrity, loyalty, and friendliness. From his intimate friends, the king shall find out about his strength, health, and character, whether lazy or energetic, fickle or steady. The candidate's amenability and love of mankind, absence of a tendency to hate, shall be ascertained by personal observation. I think this, in essence, talks about what kind of an effective competency management systems were available in India. But in the last 60 years, as you can see from the literature, we have started adopting the Western models, particularly the American models, and that have led to a lot of problems at organizational level, right? Now, that is the background under in which we are now going to discuss. So the perspective, again, I'll come back to the Indian perspective versus what is happening in the corporate, particularly from the literature that is available in human resource management. So we all have competencies, and if you don't have some competencies, and as you all know, we are all lifelong learners, and we acquire those competencies because we want to survive and perform in our organizations. Now, when you acquire these competencies, or you have already those competencies with you, that will be manifested through your behavior at the highest form. Your behavior manifests your actions, thoughts, and feelings. And from these things, you will produce the results for the organization, maybe products or services, and that will give you the results. Now, the results are what actually makes you, one, a performing unit in the organization. Number two, determines where and what kind of rewards and positions you deserve, and how do you progress in your career. So that is the importance of competence as of now in the organizational parlance. Now, all of us have understood that there is no one single definition. I think each one of you have got your own perspective, and you have given it from your own experience and understanding of what you have already learned. So there are n number of definitions for competency, but the underlying principles of competence are same. Yeah, anybody wants to say something?
Yes, sir. I wanted to just, since you have mentioned about the Arthashastra by Kautilya, I recall what Manu has mentioned in Manusmriti, chapter 7, verse 54. He mentions that he talks about the king as to how he can manage his kingdom. Then he mentions the let him appoint 7 or 8 ministers whose ancestors have been royal servants, who are versed in the sciences, heroes skilled in the use of weapons, and descended from noble families, and who have been tried. Now, my question here is, like you have mentioned, that people can acquire a competency, though they may not be belonging to maybe any dynasty of having those competencies. So, if you can mention upon this, thank you very much.
Okay. Yeah, Mr. Jagannath Kulkarni.
Yes, sir, right.
Yeah. This is what you have just now said, right?
Yes, sir, I said this.
But I think Mr. Kamlesh also raised his hand. Did he?
No, sir. I didn't say anything.
Okay, okay. So fine. Okay, I think we will address this issue. 1 second. Okay, we will address it as we go along, and bear with me. I think this will be covered. I think what is highlighted here, you just look at that. Spencer and Spencer, 1993. Competencies are underlying characteristics of people that indicate ways of behaving or thinking generalizing across situations, and enduring for reasonably long period of time. So they are dynamic in nature. As we keep on learning, some things will change, but they don't change rapidly. Competencies stay with us, and they are going to be there with us for a long time. Now, the next one I would like you to read is Voyages 1982. The competency is an underlying characteristic of a person. It may be a motive, trait, skill, aspect of one's self-image, or social role, or a body of knowledge which he or she uses. They are characteristics that are causally related to effective or superior performance in a job. If you look at most of the definitions, two things are very, very important. One is the KSAs of the individual, and number two, it should be related to your performance on the job. Therefore, whatever the discourse that we are going to have on competency in this session is all related to your organizational performance and nothing else beyond that. So we are not going to look at how these competencies are going to impact you at a personal level. That is not a scope of this discussion, right? There are several definitions. I'm just putting you across this discussion, exposing you to these discussions. Anyway, this PPT will be available with you. You can read it later on. I am not going to deliberate on each one of them, but one definition which Seema Sanghi, she has published a book on competency mapping. What she uses, I think, is quite interesting. It is an underlying behavioral characteristic that can result in effective individual performance, focusing on personal characteristics not directly tied to work and achievement, right? And in the other definitions, I've highlighted some portions. You can see a pattern. Most of them are talking about the same, except the wordings are different because each researcher has published in his own way, depending on his own context and experience and the research that he has done. So characteristic of a person and effective job performance are common to most of them, except that in one case, he will also say these are portable. That is your competence you can carry from one area to the other area. Your competence you can carry from one area to other area. I'll come to some examples of it. Let me finish competency and then the competence. Then we will discuss about some examples. Now, if you look at Hoffman's, what he says from the meta-analysis of all the literature, it is underlying qualification and attributes of a person. I think one of you have said that. And these are observable. Competencies have to be observable. You cannot have something which cannot be seen and measured as a part of competency, since it is going to be used in the organizational context for determining the performance of an individual and standard of performance outcomes. This is important. I think one of you have said that the standard of individual performance, when you talk about competence, many people can have competence. And what you are talking about is a minimum competence or a standard competence or an extraordinary competence. All of us have similar competencies, but some of us are rated to be better performers than the others. So what differentiates one from the other is also to be understood while learning this topic, right? And the most important thing which I was talking to you is the portability. They can be taken from one area of work to the other area of work. Okay, now let's pause here for a while. And when you're driving, what is the most important aspect of a driver?
To make us reach the destination.
Knowing how to drive.
Knowing how to drive. Okay. Now, some people, most of you, I'm sure, must be driving some vehicle or the other, and some of you may have your own driver who is driving you every day. When you look at the recruitment of a driver, do you just look at only driving or something more?
Skill as well as knowledge of driving.
Okay, knowledge of
And
driving.
habits
Yeah.
also, sir. Whether he's indulging any non-required habits.
Okay. Habits. Okay.
Attitudes.
Attitude. Okay.
The number of years of experience in driving and history of whether there was any accident or, safety aspects,
Okay.
historical safety.
Road
Okay.
understanding.
Good understanding of.
Road driving and road understanding.
Okay.
I would check for reference, sir.
Okay. 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 Do you also look at the emotional balance of the driver, or you just take, somebody who is rash, who is impulsive, does it suit a driver, though he's a good driver?
No, we take
No.
care of it.
Right. Okay. So driving is a technical skill, right? Now that driving depends on the skill is dependent on whether he is driving a four-wheeler car or a bus or a truck or whatever. So and the driving is not uniform across all the vehicles. For each vehicle, the required competence is different. Yes. Agreed? If I can drive a car, doesn't mean that I can drive a bus or a
True, sir.
Correct, correct.
yeah, right?
Absolutely.
Yes, yes.
Right.
Yes.
So these competence which we are talking about, driving as a technical skill, is specific to a job, and each individual may have his or her own level of performance there. But then driver as a person, it is not good enough to have this technical skill. He should have emotional stability. He should not have bad habits. He should be alert. He should have certain respect for the people with whom he is working. He should have some communication skills. It is not enough that you are a good driver, but you should also be able to communicate to the people around in the place where you're working. Now, these are all again the individual traits. Agreed?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Now, the second part of it moves along with you, whichever the pace you're working. So I may be working in company A today. I may be working in company B today. So my personality characteristics are going to stick with me, and they're going to be with me wherever I am working. Right? And today I may be a driver for let us say, a road transport corporation bus. But if I improve my skill, I may be promoted to driving a very sophisticated multi-axle air-conditioned sleeper bus. Right? So that is related to skill. This is related to the competence. Now, there is a difference in these two. Now, this is what actually is very important for you to understand. Now, let us understand now, before we go for some further discussion on this, what is competence? Competence belongs to the role. That is, driving, the skill of driving is related to the role. It has nothing to do with the individual, whereas competency belongs to the individual. So the characteristics that we described about a driver being honest, sincere, you should not be selling parts of the car or selling the petrol when the boss is not around. He should have emotional stability. He should be loyal, obedient, faithful, whatever the characteristics that you're looking at, and he should have some good communication skills, good hygiene for himself. All that is very important, which belong to the person. So competency belongs to the person, whereas competence belongs to the role. Does it make a little more clear than what we were before?
Yes, sir.
Correct, sir. Correct.
Right. So competence, for example, in your organization, you want everybody to be, MS Office friendly or user, let us say. Now that is in my role as a data entry operator, for example, if I have to use MS Excel, then the competence required is that I must be an expert in use of MS Excel. But then that is not enough when you are looking at the competency of that person. The person should have several other characteristics which are important for performing in that role. So though that is what is competency of a person, whereas the competence required to be in that role, particular role, is that he should have the knowledge of MS Excel. So competencies are the characteristics for manager that lead to the demonstration of skills and abilities, which results in effective performance within an occupational area. Now, the competency actually can move from one occupational area to the other occupational area, right? I may be working as a professor today in an institution, in a university today, but with the kind of competence I have, competencies I have, I can also move to a corporate tomorrow, and then my occupational area change, but the competency can still stand by me to perform well in my new occupational area. Whereas for being a teacher, in the role of a teacher, the competence required can be different from being a trainer in a corporate, and that role has different competence requirements. Do you agree or disagree?
Agree, sir.
Agree, right? So if you have understood this, then I think all of us are then on the same page. So competence is related to a particular role, and competencies are related to the person, and the person's competence can move along with him, but the role competence required is going to be specific to the role. And it does not mean a person who is performing a role today cannot change his role and get into a different role. That is where you can learn competencies, enhance your competence, and then move up in the ladder in your respective organizations. So now let us look at how do you differentiate between competence and competency. Competence is skill-based, competency is behavior-based. I think as we go along in the next few slides, you will see that behavior is at the highest level in the pyramid of competency pyramid. So that is what is manifested at the highest level, and how do you write these competencies in the organization? I think some of you have already got the experience. It is a challenging task. We will learn some part of it maybe in the next session. Now, competence is related to attributes to the job, whereas competency is attributed to the person. Competence is process-driven or process-centric, and competency is related to the results. And therefore, the competency mapping is all about performance management, because as an individual, we are all responsible to deliver certain amount of results to our organization. Now, competence standard attained, and competency, it's a manner of behavior in which you are conducting your business. And competence, what is measured is what is looked at. And that is why, when you are taking an interview for a driver, you look for certain competence related to the role. But and how do you know what is the maximum speed, how many accidents you've done, how punctual you are? Those are all some things which are measured. And if you like them, then you can say, you can determine that whether this person is suitable technically for that particular role. But then whether he is going to be hired depends on what are the other characteristics of the person by which you can determine whether he or she is suitable for that role. So how this standard is achieved is very, very important. If you have the integrity issue with the driver, the prospective driver, if you have question about his capability to drive without accidents, then obviously although he has the competence, you will not recruit him because his competencies are not suitable to your requirement, right? So competencies are the characteristics of an individual. Competencies lead to demonstration of skills and abilities. Hence, competencies must be observable, right? So that is why, one of you said, I will take references. Why do you take references? Because somebody who has observed the person as a driver would be able to give you some inputs on his competencies, and that will be helpful to you as an input to take a decision. And this aspect of competence is important from the assessment center or the development center perspective. And the focus of this entire course is on this very aspect of it. So this is going to be good competencies will lead to effective performance, but that does not mean that people with similar competencies will perform at the same level in a same context. Again, there are different levels of performance. Why this performance differs, and how are we going to deal with that? How are we going to assess that? We will look into. So, are there any questions? Okay. All right. I think this is this you can read once you receive the PPT. But I think what is more important is what are the characteristics of competencies. Some of you would have heard the phrase core competencies. Core competence, have you heard?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, what is competence? Now we have understood competence and then competencies. Competence is role specific and competence is individual specific. What are core competencies?
So core competencies would be some non-negotiable requirements or abilities for that job role. If the person doesn't have the core competency, we can't even look at hiring the person. And then besides the core competencies, there would be other competences which are either additional, which may or may not benefit to the role. That's my understanding.
Okay, I think we will leave it at that. In the next couple of slides, we will go a little more into the detail on what is core competence, and that's very, very important to understand. Now, at this point in time, now let us look at competencies as characteristics of an individual. Now, as individuals, we have motives, traits, self-concept, knowledge, and skills. Now, of the 5 that we have talked about here, what is easy to observe? What is easy to manifest out of these 5? I mean, all of
Self-concept, sir.
sorry?
Self-concept,
Uh-huh.
knowledge, sir.
Knowledge, okay, great, okay.
I agree
Skills.
with knowledge.
Skills, okay, skills, knowledge, self-concept, you are of the view that they're easily manifested and they can be observed easily. Whereas traits and motives may not be easily observed. What is my motive? You can't see. All that you can see is whether I have the basic knowledge to explain you the concepts, or whether I have I have demonstrated the skill to communicate what I want to communicate to you all. That is what you are able to see. But you really do not know what are my motives and traits. All of you have probably been right in identifying this particular dimension. Now, what is a motive? It is a thing a person consistently thinks about or wants that causes action. Now, what I'm thinking, what is there in my mind, it's not easy for any one of you to really measure or understand or observe. But motives drive, direct or select behavior towards certain actions or goals and away from others. So what drives me to come on a Sunday at 8:30? What drives you to attend the call? I'm sure there are a number of students who have not joined today, but only some of you have joined on this call. So what is the motive for you to join is individualistic. It's not easy to observe. It can't be measured so conveniently, but then that's a very, very important thing. Traits, physical characteristics, and consistent responses to situations and information. Again, these are not easy. No, very simple situation we keep looking at. For example, you are waiting for a bus on the road, let us say, and suddenly some small accident takes place in front of you. Do all people respond in the same way to an accident in their presence?
No.
No, sir.
No, some people rush, some people are just bystanders, some people these days may be crazy to start, taking a video of what is happening. For them, it is, taking a video and posting it on the social media is their greatest satisfaction. While others may rush to the accident site, organize some relief, call for some medical help and all that. So this kind of response to a situation or to some information is not easy to measure or observe unless you go through some situation. The word situation is very, very important. I think after a few slides, we will use this concept of situation, and therefore I'm highlighting that. Now, let us look at what you have said is very right. From this small diagram, you will see which is borrowed from Spencer and Spencer's paper. So traits and motives, they are core personality, most difficult to develop. It's not easy to develop one's motives and traits, but definitely it's relatively possible to develop maybe over a period of time values and attitudes. One can change, one can improve on the attitudes of people, but much easily developed and easily measured and easily observed are the knowledge and the skills parts of it. All right, no dispute on this. Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Now, when we talk about competencies, obviously at the individual level, we are talking about, there are different kinds, they are classified into different types of competencies. There are something called threshold competencies and the functional competencies. Threshold competencies are essential in everyone's job. In fact, there are some people also call us in management or as managerial competencies. Can any one of you tell me some managerial competencies?
Decision making, negotiation.
Very good.
Leadership skills, time
Leadership
management.
skills.
Communication system, communication,
Leadership skill.
Leadership skill. Okay.
Team building.
Getting the things
business,
done.
business acumen.
Time management.
Yes. Good. Excellent.
Problem
But
solving.
sir, I think the most important characteristic of any manager is to know your people, know their competencies, and be able to put them in the right place. Thank you.
Okay. So likewise, for any manager, there are some threshold competencies that are minimum required. They're essential, right? But then if I have all these competencies, that does not mean that I'm a better manager or a better performer than the others. So threshold competencies are those competencies which are essential characteristics. Everyone in the job needs to be minimally effective, but this does not distinguish superior from average performers. So managerial competencies, most of you have said this. I think those are essential characteristics, but that does not mean that all those who have got these characteristics are going to be equally effective. Now, what makes you distinctive from others, what differentiates you from others being a manager as a performing manager is your functional competencies. That is how effectively, if you're working in HR department, how effectively your functional competencies are being used. That is what is important for you to be, made a cut above the rest. Now, for example, most of you, I'm sure, must be probably in the L&D department or HR department. Now, as a HR manager, I may be using most of my functional capabilities or functional requirements in my office. But of late, there are some new competence that is available in the market. For example, HR analytics, gamification, things like that, which are available, maybe even using some AI related tools in your HR processes. Now, if some HR managers have got these additional skills and knowledge, which they are using in their day-to-day discharge of responsibilities in their role as HR manager, then they will definitely be rated a better performing manager than those who have got the traditional HR knowledge and skills. Now, that is what is the functional competence. Functional competences are not, they are not static. They keep changing. You have to evolve with those things, and then you should be a lifelong learner to adopt those kinds of functional competences that will make you a better manager vis-a-vis the rest of the managers. There are other competencies which are important from the organizational perspective, functional perspective, behavioral perspective, and the leadership competencies. Now, please understand, I think one of you working in HSBC, which is an international bank. It's a multinational bank, right? And there are maybe some people here may have worked in some Indian banks. I do not know, or you may be still working in Indian bank. Now, in these two contexts, one, you can have a public sector bank, a private sector bank, and a multinational bank. Whether the competencies at the organizational level, are they uniform across in each of these banks to make the people to be successful, or are they different? If they are different, how? If they are same, how? Can you give me the ratio? Am I clear to you?
So can you please repeat the
Definitely, sir,
question?
it is different. Definitely, it is different.
No, there are banks. Now, all banks require certain amount of competencies. Now, we have earlier said competencies are at the individual level, right? And competence is a role-specific skill. Now, in the case of banks, just giving an example as just to demonstrate that beyond individual, there is something called an organizational competency. Let us understand. You have different kinds of banks. In fact, there are some rural banks, there are some cooperative banks, there are some public sector banks, then private sector banks, multinational banks. They're all banks, but there are different types of banks. Now, in these banks, the set of competencies that create success for the managers or the employees working in those organizations, are they same? Are they different?
They are different, sir. They are different because, like you mentioned about the types of banks, like rural bank, urban bank. So definitely, the maybe basic competencies may be the same, but what is required related to job is different. Number one. Second is what I always talk about is the stake. What stake you have in the organization? Like if you are working in public sector, your stake may be different. If you are working in private sector, privately managed environment, the stake will be different, and so that drives your need to improve competence. Thank you.
Okay, good. Now you
Sir,
said,
I feel, I feel, sir, like competence would be the same whether you're in rural or you're in urban. But competencies will differ because there you'll be dealing with, different sets of, behaviors and people and attitudes and things like that. That's my understanding.
okay, now is there any role for the organization in these competencies, or is it purely individual?
There is a role of the organization.
Okay, in what way, ma'am? Can you just elaborate a little more?
Sir, how they are setting up the process, what sort of people are they hiring, what sort of customers are they acquiring, and I believe these are the actions which can be set by the organization at the level of competency in differentiation of banks.
Okay, that's
Sir,
very,
I feel
yeah.
I feel the leadership and the hierarchical structure, the organization culture also would make some difference.
Okay, now let's come to the basic. Yes, Mayuri, ma'am, right?
Yes, sir. So, sir, I agree with what Tia is saying that organizations definitely play a huge role when it comes to the development of competency. It is what culture the organization has, whether it's a learning based culture, whether they want a growing organization. Because on hiring, you will be having basic competence. How do you develop your people to move from, let's say, an individual role to a line manager role or probably to a leadership position? I think all of these rely heavily on the organization's input in terms of the development of its employees. There are certain organizations who might really not be bothered as to what their employees are at what level they want to develop them. But learning organizations with learning culture and giving importance to your employees, I think those organizations would definitely push people to achieve their best by helping them to garner more on their competence. Might have a basic level, but how you develop them is really based on the organization. The kind of assignments you get, the kind of feedback you get, the kind of trainings you are sent to, or the kind of developmental process that the organization offers is what I feel.
Okay, I think we can take a small case in point. Uh, Let's look at Tatas, right? I'm sure all of you are aware of Tata Group and the kinds of companies that they have. Which of the Tata Group companies is very distinctive from the rest of the companies? I mean, each one is of course separate, but then at least one company has completely moved away from the traditional Tata culture and created a great name for itself. Which company do you think is that?
Is it Disco?
Okay. Anybody else?
I remember the very old advertisement of Tata, which mentions we also make steel.
Okay.
A very old advertisement of Tata, in which they have mentioned so many activities of Tata Group, and then ultimately they mentioned that we also make steel.
Yes, that's a
So,
very powerful
thank you.
advertisement. Yeah. Okay. Anybody else?
Is it the joint venture with Starbucks?
Uh-huh. Okay. Well, let's toss the ideas. We will think about what is the correct one as we
TCS, sir. TCS, Tata Consultancy Service.
consultancy service. I mean, that's also a good example, you know. A traditional truck and a steel maker to make such a big name in the information technology is definitely a very unique achievement. But that is more into services. I'm looking at the product company, product-based company.
Tata Solar.
Okay. Okay, now
So
let's
earlier,
ask. Yeah.
Motor, Tata Motors.
Sir, Tata Salt.
Okay.
so earlier this sales company called Eureka Forbes was also a part of the Tata groups. I don't know if you're mentioning Eureka Forbes.
Okay. Now let me ask you. Have you heard of Titan?
Yes.
Yeah.
Is it a Tata company?
Yes.
Yes.
Is it very different from the rest of the Tata Group companies? They are in consumer products. They are
In what
globally
sense?
competitive. They make some of the finest watches in the world, and they do not appear to be a typical clone of any Tata company. Do you agree or not? In fact, they have created its identity also differently. They did not say Tata watches. They said Titan. Why is it unique? And what are its organizational capabilities? You know, in Tata Group, at one point in time, when they started making cars, they said, irrespective of whatever the car they make, from some angle, all cars look like trucks. All cars of Tatas look like trucks and some angle. But then from that perception to what they are, at least in Titan, the kind of product that they're competing with globally are what are the product lines that they have in Titan? Can you name? Are you aware?
Fast track.
Yeah, watches. Watches. One is they are into the watch business. Apart from that,
Jewelry.
jewelry. Okay. Tanishq. Yeah.
Yeah, Tanishq.
They are into perfumes. They are into
West Side Garments.
Chemicals they are into, sir.
right. Now look at
But
the
Garments, sir, Garments is a different company name. It's Tata Trent. It is not Titan. No?
no. Under Titan, they have
West Side
brand
is also
which
part of Tata, no?
sarees.
Pardon me?
They have a sari brand under Titan.
Yes.
Yeah, it's called
Tanera. Yes, sir, Tanera.
Tanera.
Taneira. Taneira. Right. Now they have created so many brands under one company, which looks very different from the rest of the Tata companies. And what is that they have done is creating a specific set of competencies which are very different from the rest of the Tatas. Right? Now, these are organizational competencies. Now, when I asked you some time ago about the core competence of organizations, this core competence was a phrase coined by, can you name the person who coined that?
Hema Sanghi.
C.K. Prahlad. He's no more, but a great management thinker. And he came out with this concept called core competence. Now, if you remember, in 1990, when the Indian government opened up the economy and this LPG came, liberalization, globalization, this came into existence. Many companies, whoever had a lot of money with them, the cash reserves with them, they thought that with money they can get into any business and succeed. So people started expanding into various kinds of businesses, thinking that now there are no government restrictions, I can go and occupy the space and I can be successful, I can make a big business empire. And consequent to that, many companies failed. A lot of companies burned their fingers. They've lost lots of money, crores of money in their, venturing into areas which they thought with money they can go and succeed. Now, at that time, Prahlad did a considerable amount of study and then came out with this concept called core competence. He said, just because you have the financial muscle, you cannot go and succeed in any business that you want. It all depends on what kind of core competence you have as a company or as a group. If your business expansion falls into that area where you are having the core competence, then you are likely to succeed. If you are not, then your business is going to fail. I'll give you a classic example. All of you know ITC, right?
Yes,
Yes,
Indian
sir.
Tobacco Company.
Yes.
Right. All of you know it as a tobacco company. In fact, today I think most of the businesses they are trying to diversify are non-tobacco, but still it is our recall is as a cigarette or a tobacco company. Now this company, obviously with this tobacco business, had lot of reserves with them and lot of money with them, and that is a blue chip company. It was and it is. So they thought that they can get into various kinds of business. One of the business they thought was financial services. So in early 90s, they floated a company called Classic Financial Services. They wanted to compete in the space of financial services. And soon they made a complete mess of it. They lost something like 300 crores in that. And then they have wound up the business. Now the same company, much before the Classic Financial fiasco, when they had money and they wanted to diversify into some business, at that time, I think it was Sapru Jain. Sapru was the head of the business, chairman of the ITC company. They wanted to see where can we expand our business. And after doing sufficient amount of thinking and analysis, they realized that they are very strong in services. Although ITC is very strong in manufacturing, more than that, their strength is in services. And as a consequence of that, they thought they should expand into the hospitality business. They have set up the Sheraton Group, at the Welcome Group at that point in time. And then, because they didn't have the expertise in that, initially they have tied up with the Sheraton Group. Welcome Sheraton was the co-branded or the joint venture. After gaining sufficient experience, they have separated out ITC hotels, and then rest of it is history. They are very successful in the hotel business. So going by the organizational competencies, their competence is ability to manage services is what their core competence, and therefore they have succeeded. And in financial services, they don't have their core competence did not work, therefore they have failed. Right? But when it comes to Titan versus other Tata Group, although Titan business is completely different, a very sophisticated, globally competitive. You're competing with the finest watch business in Swiss. And yet they were able to acquire, that is why they have created a completely different brand. And many people in the market, they don't even know Titan belongs to Tata Group. And they have created a new business for themselves, which is globally competitive. One of the best companies in India today is Titan. Okay, that is on the organizational competencies. Now, coming to functional competencies, they are needed for an employee to perform in the job. I've told you the example of HR manager. Now, all HR managers may be having the base required functional competencies, the guy who's going to be differentiated will be the one who will have the cutting edge competencies. All of you may be interested in either focusing in your T&D space or setting up your own T&D company, or thriving as a freelance training professional. But if you want to thrive, it is not enough to have the bare minimum core competencies. You may be able to survive, but if you want to excel and progress, then you need to have the cutting edge competencies that are required in your functional area. Then behavioral competencies are an understanding of the attitudes and demonstrable actions that create the success in that role. Now, even for a rudimentary job like a security guard in any office, you need to have certain amount of behavioral competencies, right? Now, whether it is at a leadership level or at a very, very rudimentary job, you also need to have certain amount of competencies. We will discuss about behavioral competency model at a subsequent class. Then leadership competencies, I think we're going to discuss about the leadership competency framework. So specific leadership behaviors which are required for a leader to perform. Essential versus distinctive. One example here is, it is quite often seen in the organizations. Suppose you are, say, let us say, a vice president marketing or vice president finance or vice president HR, and you are working in a company, and then you get a better offer from a different company, and then you move out to that company. Typically, what happens is, in these kinds of roles, when you move out, you also move with your team. You just don't move alone. Quite a few of your own, team members would like to come along with you, because you will also offer them a better, pay, or a better, role for them in the new organization. Now, that is not called a leadership competence. Leadership competency is one, irrespective of the situation. If you are able to go and perform in that particular context or situation, then your leadership competencies are intact. But if you keep moving with the same team and then you want to show that you are successful, that does not augur well with the leadership competencies. Now, core competences, workplace competence, I think we have discussed about the concept of core competence. I'm not going further into that. But then core competence is required at the organization level. That is why I've given so much of emphasis on that. Now, each company has its own core competence. And if you, I don't know whether you've already done a paper on strategy. In strategy, you have two models of strategy. One is RBV, resource-based view. The other one is IO model, industrial organization-based strategy. Now, in one strategy, in one, you look at, you will leverage your internal strengths to take on the opportunities that are emerging in the market. Resource-based view, that is, your internal strengths will determine what kinds of businesses you will get in. The industrial organization model is, you will create competencies or the resources which are required to encash the opportunities that are coming up in the market. Both models are successful. It all depends on the company. So in the case of core competencies, these are the organization-based competencies, and each organization has to focus on them. The purpose is strategic, and whether you take RBU model or IO model, it all depends on which strategy are you going to work. And it is not true to say that only one model will work for one organization. As time passes by, today you may be using the RBU model. 10 years from now, you may be using the IO model, because you have been able to create some new core competence within your organization. And participants will be your business unit. Like I told you, in the case of ITC, the business unit in the fiasco of financial services is classic finance. And in the hotels, it was the ITC hotels or the ITC hotels division in the beginning. First, initially, it was a division. Then they created ITC Hotels Company. Then they brought it back to ITC as a division. Now they are again hiving it off as a separate company. And tasks are processes, and competencies are global. That is within the organization, across the organization or across the group. Maybe sometimes. Workplace competencies are basically related to individual. They are tactical. It is participant is the individual employee. the tasks are mostly activities, and they are all position based. The competences really required from one level to the other level, from one position to the other positions can vary, and they will be important. Now, how are they important from the different stakeholders? The guy who's holding the role, if I'm a driver and if I know my competence and competencies, then I can create superior performance or to be successful in the job. And for example, if a person has got extremely good driving skills, but he is lacking some other competencies at an individual level, I think if somebody can mentor him, he can be a better driver. So competencies can be developed over a period of time, but you need certain inputs and certain training for that. Competencies can be trained, right? At a manager level, provide a common language, objective definition to help select and develop employees and provide language to guide performance feedback. Okay. And at an organization level, provide an action-oriented common language to identify the key behaviors that create successes. If of late I've been hearing that ITC is trying to foray into setting up of hospitals because they know that their core strength is services. They are effectively able to manage for so many decades, and their success in hotels is demonstrated. And they think that today managing a hotel is something akin to managing a 5-star property. Therefore, the technical competencies can be hired, the doctors, physicians, surgeons, and all can be hired and managed, but their core competence is managing properties, managing services. I'm hearing that they're planning to get into hospitals business because healthcare is a booming business now. Now, competency movement, where did it start? How did it start? It all started somewhere around 1973 when McClelland published a paper titled Testing for Competence Rather Than for Intelligence. It's a very interesting study. I think those of you who have got time can read this paper. The title is available, and I'm sure all of you know who is David McClelland. And he has given some good theory about the theories of one of the theories of motivation. Now, he found something very interesting, and all of you can also validate this because all of you are performing, all of you are successful, and all of you want to further succeed in your life. But then you go back to your college days and the school days and find out who are the top cream of your class, top 15%, and who are the top bottom 15%. And if you are maybe around 40, 45 years of age, by now you would have already spent about 20 years in working in various organizations. Now, if you look back and assuming that you are in the top 15% or bottom 15%, and how do the top 15% and bottom 50% of your own classmates compare in today's achievement of the performance in terms of success? Can any one of you share your thoughts on this? Have you come across somebody from your class who was not at all good in the class, but then is an outstanding success, maybe has done extremely well, and you think that, my God, this guy is a dud, he was a dud, and today he's doing so pretty well?
I have come across people like that.
Okay.
Yeah. Someone who was a backbencher throughout college. And then when he got into graduation, he found his field and then he became a topper in his undergrad. And then he was working with a couple of organizations and he started his own business.
Wonderful, wonderful. Apurva ma'am?
So, as mentioned, there was a guy in my college throughout. I never saw him in my class. Like throughout 4 years, his attendance was like 30-40%. And when recently I came across his LinkedIn profile, I was going through that he's currently working with Microsoft, and parallelly, he's setting up his own small firm of real estate which he started off. So I really thought that there was no point of sitting being the front bencher. It's better you are the last bencher. So I told him the same that I'm really happy to see you the transition which you have taken over yourself.
Wonderful, wonderful. So this is what McClelland found, he felt that he thought that there was a need to, typically we all do this IQ test for various recruitments and we go by that score. But then is the IQ score is a predictor of your success in life, in your corporate life, as well as in your personal life, is something that he wanted to investigate. And he found he has taken samples and people of a certain class of people who are the toppers, who are the bottom 15% or so. And then 20 years later, what were they doing and how they progress in their life, how have they achieved their success in life and all that. And then he found that, there is hardly any distinction between the toppers and the bottom most performers in the class. And that has baffled him. He thought that, typically what all of us have been told in the school days, in the childhood, is that you should be topper, you should be number 1, number 2, number 3, and if you get first mark, your mom will give you some, toffee or something. You are recognized, and your brother is not getting as many marks, he'll be scolded and all that. But this particular paper which he published turned out to be something very, very interesting, and a lot of research has taken place. And he said, look, your intelligence is important, but then intelligence is not alone important. You require certain other qualities. And if you don't have the other qualities, other characteristics, your success cannot be predicted. Right? So that is the basic, argument. So he argued that intelligence tests are not valid predictors of performance at work. So, and typically, in fact, there was a study in US. They have taken in a certain business school people of a certain class, and they've tracked their performance for the next 30 years. And at the end of 30 years, they found that people who were the toppers of the class, no doubt they settled well, but they've settled in professions like, teaching or a government job and things. They were doing well, but they were happy, they were doing well, they were settled well. But then more important was the people who were at the bottom, like you said, the backbencher kind of a person. These people have occupied government positions. They have become politicians, they have become ministers, and some of the toppers were actually reporting to them after 30 years. And the middle part, the middle one, were the ones who are happily settled in a corporate job and doing a fairly good work. So this study, what was done in 30-year longitudinal study, also corroborates with what McClelland did for 20 years period. And the competencies requirement has actually surfaced from then onwards. Now look at this. Now I'm bringing this slide again. I'm not going to talk anything, but look at the competencies and core competence. All these three, if you can keep on reading this and reflecting on that, your conceptual understanding will further strengthen. Yes, Sanjay sir, you want to say something?
No, sir. I'm just reading.
Okay. All right. Now, this is what I've said. 1973 started off with McClelland. Then other researchers have tagged on to this particular work, and then they have created some new instruments, new tools for studying this. So, Voyages, the context for identifying the special characteristics and assessing and developing of managerial talent. In 1982, he came out with a job competency survey, again, an instrument which was used. And then in 1993, development of competency dictionary by Spencer and Spencer. He came out with a set of competencies and definition for each one of them. And then he also came out with job competence assessment method. So that is the history of it. Now, there are what are the advantages of competencies? Basically, this you can study. I have given enough material here for you to be able to study. There's no point in explaining this, but then it basically is divided into 5 areas: direction, measurable, development, distinct, and integration. Now, the integration part of it, I will delve a little more. Others you can understand by reading it. It can be, the competencies can be integrated to all HR functions: recruitment and selection, training and development, performance management, career and section planning, and management of rewards and incentives, and reinforcing key value behaviors. So when you have competency models applied in your organization, it sets the integration process into motion. And that is one advantage which others do not have. In fact, today, some of the companies are probably not focusing so much on job analysis. They are focusing more on competency models, because that gives them the broader understanding of where the integration can take place. When you are talking of agile workforce, actually competency model helps you in creating the agile organizations. Okay. Now, there are some criticisms. Although the competency can be so fascinating to study, it's looking at the examples and all, it sounds so great and all. But then one of the problems in at least Indian context is not many HR leaders understand what is competency, what is competence, and what is competency mapping. And therefore, they won't implement. So even if you go with a few of you go and talk to your boss about implementing some competency models, they may not be really encouraging you, because they themselves lack the understanding of it. And number two, it is difficult. A lot of work is involved in defining the competencies, and therefore organizations shy away, because it's a long-term game. Once you start, you won't get an immediate here and now reward or a return on investment. But if you take a perspective of maybe 5 to 10 years, your organization will be able to get the return on investment. So the long-term game, many people do not want to play, right? And therefore, they'll go for the short side. Okay, some of these essentials, I think I already briefed you. But one thing that I want to tell you is precise writing of the competencies is very, very important. The precision of the expression is very important. I'll take the example of this. Look at this. Now, if you want to write a competency in your organization, and if you are writing for some particular role, that role should be focused on setting and achieving goals. That's an incorrect way of writing. On the face of it, it looks nice, but it is not the correct way of writing the competency. Why? Because setting goals and achieving goals are two different things. Many organizations, many individuals are great at writing goals, but then what we lack is execution skills. If you don't have the execution skills, then your achievement of the goals will be suspect. And therefore, you should not mix such objectives or such goals. And hence, when you are writing competency, often you should not use the word and combine two different objectives. So writing the goals for break or competencies has to be done very, very carefully. It has to be multiple times reviewed, and then you have to freeze them. Others, I think you can all understand. Most of them are explained by me. Now, let's move to competency model. So are we clear till now, whatever has been discussed? Is there any question? I think we still have another 7 minutes. If any question, I will answer you. Otherwise, I'll move forward. Yeah, any question?
No, sir.
Are you able to understand?
Yes, sir.
With clarity and purpose. Okay?
Yes.
All right. Wonderful, wonderful. I think our class ends at 10 o'clock, right?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Now, having understood competence, competency, and competencies plus the core competence, I think we have covered all the 4 concepts today in adequate detail with sufficient number of examples. Now, let us understand what is a competency model. I think in this entire course, you're going to study different models. That is what is important and interesting. So it is a competency model is one that describes combination of knowledge, skills, and characteristics needed to effectively perform a role in an organization and is used as a HR tool for selection, T&D, and appraisal and succession plan. So this is essentially highly focused on HR and L&D. There's a close link between HR and L&D. In some companies, L&D is a part of HR, and some companies both are different, but there's a very close interlink between these two. Now, look at the competency pyramid that is shown here. Now, at the bottom, at the topmost, as I mentioned a little while ago, is the behavior. That is the highest form where you have to manifest, demonstrate your competencies through your behavior. But then at the bottommost, you have the aptitude and personal characteristics. And then above that, you have the skills and knowledge. Now, competencies must be defined along with examples when you're writing your competency manual in your organization. If some of you are already implementing in your organization, I hope it is in sufficient detail because these are not easily understood by different people. They have different individuals have different ways of interpreting them. Give them specific, precise examples so that it is understood across. Because implementation is not done by one person, it is done by several people, and therefore the clarity of thought, clarity in examples is very important. Although the innate characteristics are fixed in a person, or for most part, behaviors can be modified and taught, and that requires the intervention of L&D. L&D is a very important component of the entire competency, mapping and creating the competencies in the organization, because competencies can be taught, people can be changed, people behaviors can be modified, and the L&D plays a very important role, and that is why it is a part of our diploma program. Now, let us say in a certain bank, they have understood that they need to change their competencies required for sales people to increase their business. So they created this sales force related competency model they have created. This has different dimensions. One is personality, ability, knowledge, skills in them, in that. Now, I'm not going to deliberate on all that. Maybe by tomorrow or so, I'll post it to the HQ head office, national office, and then they will circulate this to you. Please go through this. And if any one of you is interested in creating certain competency model for your training and development department or any department that you are working with, so in the next class, if you say, create one competency model, something on similar lines, and send it to me in advance before the next class. And if it is meeting the basic requirements, the framework of the competency model, I will let you present it to the entire group. That will be an interesting experience. Are you game for it?
Yeah.
Okay. So work on that. And I think I will close here. We have just 2 minutes more. And let me stop the presentation here. Any feedback that you want to give to me in terms of my deliberations, my speech, I mean, whatever the way that you want to give the feedback, I'm okay.
Sir.
Yeah.
Sir, in competencies, there is an iceberg model.
Okay.
What it says that there are certain competencies which are beneath the water and above the water.
We will come to that in the next session.
Okay.
Next session, we will discuss that. I think we just introduced the basics and the models, and the rest of it we will discuss. We have a series of classes, so that will be definitely part of that.
Okay. Done, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, not a feedback, but more of a compliment. I think you have explained the basics of competency very well. I remember when you started the class, you said competencies are not widely used. And one of the reasons is for people not understanding what it really means and what it takes to develop them. So thank you so much for making the understanding very clear. I think from here onwards, the journey should be a little simpler for people who really want to understand. Thank
Yeah,
you
it
so much.
requires a lot of work, lot of work.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes, somebody has written whether you can connect. Yes, you can connect. I think I have given you my email. My email, I am putting it in the chat again. That is my email. So if you have any question, anything to ask, please feel free to write to me. I should be responding to you. All right. So on that note, it's 10 o'clock. I think you've got the next class. I should not come in the way. So thank you very much. You've been an extremely good audience and you have participated very well. And see you next week again. Till then, take care. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Bye-bye.